All right, well, welcome everybody in the room and online to the final presentations for our summer 2025 Science Communication Internship. We have some really exciting projects to share with you all today. We have a couple quick logistics before diving into the presentation. So we are going to record this presentation so that anybody who missed it can check it out later. Also, for everybody who is in the room here, these microphones are extremely sensitive, so just be aware of that. If you're chatting during the presentations, those people on Zoom might be hearing your conversation or creating some background noise for them. So with that, I'm gonna just try to admit people as they come in here, and we'll get started. Figure out how to get this to switch. So first, my name is Kristen Tim. I'm a faculty here at IARC at UAF. I'm also co-director for the AKCASC. My background is in science communication, this is the second year that we've run this internship program. It wouldn't be possible without the support of so many people. So first, just thank you to the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center for funding this work. Also, I just want to give a huge thank you to Mike and Leah and Heather and Christian, who really provided a lot of support and advice and mentoring to the interns all summer long. To Steve Gray and Scott Rupp for really supporting this work as it's developed over many years now. And then also to all the IARC and USGS colleagues who have mentored interns through the projects, who have provided support through field trips and lots of other ways, and just being a friendly face here in the office to folks who are new to our organization. And so for today's presentation, we're going to start off with just a brief overview of the internship project. We'll introduce this summer's interns, and then you'll hear from each of them on the major projects that they've been working on, and we should have plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. So just a very brief overview. This internship program actually started as the result of a conversation on Twitter. I started talking with a USGS scientist who is based down in Anchorage. We started chatting about science communication. And then before you know it, we were having conversations about how we could expand science communication capacity at the Alaska Science Center, which is a USGS facility that's based down in Anchorage. And so last summer, our whole internship model was centered around providing some science communication support and additional capacity there at the center. This year, it expanded to include both a USGS project as well as several CASC projects. And the internship program is modeled after one that I don't think is actually happening anymore, but started at George Mason University with the Center for Climate Change Communication. And it was a partnership between them and the National Park Service, where they had interns embedded within several different Washington, D.C. area parks, working throughout the summer to help those parks communicate about climate change. And so we have a kind of similar model where each intern is working with a specific project to help provide some support and additional capacity in science communication to the whole team. And so a little bit of background of why we're doing this and kind of the learning objectives that we brought into this work this summer. So we want the interns to leave this internship having some experience working in science communication, being able to try out different best practices and evaluate how these different practices work across a variety of different settings and projects. They will learn how to apply strategic communication principles to design and produce communication materials, work in a really interdisciplinary team and develop their skills around interdisciplinary collaboration, and then also create some portfolio-ready communication projects so that wherever they go next, they have some things that they can share with their future employers to show the work that they've been doing in the science communication field. And so our format is just that everybody is based with the AKCASC, and this summer that entailed having 2 people based here in Fairbanks and then 2 people based down in Juneau. The project ideas were identified with USGS, Alaska Science Center, and AKCASC scientists before the start of the summer. Some projects were further along in terms of conceptualization than others, which you'll hear about today. The whole internship is 9 weeks, and you'll be absolutely blown away by how much everybody has accomplished in that amount of time. So in addition to spending some time at UAF or UAS, many of the interns had the opportunity to travel out into the field or spend some time with their scientist partners at their office. And they were provided with some equipment, regular training opportunities, and ongoing support. And like I said before, they designed 1 or more communication products with their teams that they worked with. And at the core of science communication, part of the reason that I think this is so important, this quote from the UN Declaration on Human Rights really kind of drives a lot of my work, just that everybody has the right to benefit from science. And so if we believe that in the core of our work, then we have to value how we actually communicate that science. And so that's part of why we focus so much on science communication within the CASC, and why we think about communication as being really critical to providing useful and actionable science. And you'll hear through the presentations today a little bit about the goals and objectives for each communication project, as well as the audiences. And so we really put this strategic communication model into practice as all of these communication projects were developed over the course of this summer. So with that, I am going to just provide a brief introduction to our 4 interns who worked with us this summer.
Here's Alexis.
Oh, somebody might need to mute their microphone. So Diego Noreña, who is in Juneau, Gigi Friedman, who's based here in Fairbanks, Alexis Isherwood, who is also based here in Fairbanks, and then Taylor Saulsbury, who is based in Juneau. And yeah, we're going to start off by first hearing from Diego. But I will just note before we move forward, some of these projects are still undergoing some final rounds of scientific review or other types of reviews. So just please do not cite or quote or photograph this work until we know it's all
She said
set.
to mute, but I think I'm muted. But if I hit this,
approval process. So I am going to turn it over now to Diego to present the first project.
Cool. Thank you, Kristen. I just want to say thank you to everyone who was able to make it, and a big hello also to anyone who's watching this recording later. All right. My project is titled The Glacier Outburst Floods, Mendenhall Glacier. Could you stay on that first slide for a second longer?
Yeah. Sorry,
Thank you.
Diego.
No worries.
Wow. I ended up flipping back. Ah! Not a PC user. There we go.
Sweet. So I'll just give a quick overview of what a glacier outburst flood is for anyone who might not be familiar. So in the back there, you can see Mendenhall Glacier, and right in front of it is this basin called Suicide Basin, which is, there used to be another glacier, a tributary glacier of the Mendenhall, that would fill in this basin, and since it's retreated and melted and left this giant basin. It's 3/4 of a mile long and 1/2 mile wide, and it can hold up to like 460 feet of water in it. So it's huge and contains a massive amount of water. And once there's enough buoyant pressure from all that water, it can find a way underneath the main glacier, which is the Mendenhall, and flood the valley downstream, which is the Mendenhall Valley of Juneau. And just to orient a little more, there's on the left, that small picture, you can see that blue circle is where the basin is. And then there's the end of the glacier and then the valley after the lake. Next slide, please. Great. So here's a little roadmap of just what I'm going to be presenting about. Just the planning phase of the project. And then the most fun part was the collecting media and field work I got to do. And then the most challenging part, which was the writing and production, took the most amount of time. And then I'll show a little bit of the actual story map and how I plan to get it out to the public. Okay, product planning. So just a bit of context, there was already a story map created in 2019, but since then there's been a lot of research done and the science in that story map was a little irrelevant. And so my goal was to create a new one that is up to date and answers the questions. So I don't know if I mentioned before, but a story map is essentially a website that has maps, like built-in maps and photos and videos, and it's an interactive site that you can explore and learn a lot from. So the audience is first and foremost the community of Juneau. So the people who are directly being impacted from it are the ones that like we think we should understand the science of what's going on. But also it can serve as a place where people that in the future could be being impacted from glacier outburst floods could go and also learn about them. So the goal was communicating that science to the people that need it most right now, and then also looking forward to the future. So framing key questions, I had to think a lot about what exactly I wanted the story map to accomplish and what to leave in and what to leave out. And so I'll get into more about the day on the glacier, but in that picture on the right, we were up at the glacier, myself, Aaron Hood, and Amy and David doing field work. And over the horizon, we saw two coastal helicopter glacier guides walking over to us. And I mean, we were wearing coats and hats and our crampons, and these guys came over. One guy was shirtless, the other girl was in her tank top, and like it was cold. The winds were blowing from the ice field. It was pretty cold, but it was like nothing to them. And they come over and they just started asking. They saw we were doing research, obviously, and they started just asking us a bunch of questions. And so I pulled my phone out and just started writing down everything they were asking. And I noticed this was a bit of a common theme with Aaron, who's the main scientist on the university side doing the outburst research. Anywhere he'd go, people were just asking him all sorts of questions about how it works. Like, does the glacier actually lift up? How does the dam release? And so I was writing all those down, and that's like how I started to think about how, or the things that I wanted to communicate in the story map. Next slide, please.
Can you just use the keys or the arrow key?
No, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Here we go. Sorry, Diego.
No worries. It's part of being the first one to go. So step 2 of the project was collecting the media, and I was lucky enough to be able to fly up 2 different times on a helicopter with the research crew and interview them, record the fieldwork process, and take drone footage and photographs that I would use to build the story map later. And I was most impressed by how big the basin is. Like it's even from the photos that I took and I've seen and stared at maps, it's hard to comprehend how big it is until you're standing right at the base of it. It was a really good experience to be able to go up there. Next slide, please. So I won't get too much into the process of writing it and creating the map, but I ended up taking 108 gigabytes of film and photos on my 2 days up there, and I definitely could have taken more if I had more time. And the writing part was the most challenging part, I think. We spent a lot of time and a lot of drafts coming up with an outline of what we wanted to say in it, and then several meetings with Aaron going back and forth about what to include, what to exclude, and then getting really technical with the language so we're not making too broad of statements, but nothing too definitive as well. And so this part was really telling about how important the way you word things and yeah, how specific we should be when communicating science. Next slide. So here I'll actually show the story map. Hopefully the video will work. So this is what it looks like in the beginning. Again, this is just kind of to orient the user to where this is. So it's got a little animation showing exactly how it gets there. And then in this section as well, I'm trying to explain how it started, because this started happening in 2011. It's not something Juneau has dealt with forever. And so explaining where it is and why this has started happening was a really crucial point. There I did a 360 image so people can look at the mountain names that they're familiar with that you can see from the valley, and kind of gives an idea of where it is. And then here is a picture from 1893, and then 2018, that's the glacier that's receded, and that's the basin back in there where the water collects. So and this part is just more explanation about how it collects, how deep it is. Some more detail that I don't need to explain right now. Wait for it to be over. And then Molly Tankersley created this animation and explains how it drains, which is a confusing process to understand how the glacier can actually lift up. And it's pretty technical, so I won't explain it here, but it explains it in here. And then here's a time lapse showing the release, which happens over 48 hours and releases, I think last year it was 15 billion gallons of water in 48 hours that floods into the valley. And so it goes to show how impactful they are. And then I'll let the video play a little bit longer. This was in 2023, and so the impacts from the flood, the biggest impacts have been happening in the last 2 years. The floods have been the biggest, and we're waiting for the flood to happen this August. The basin's pretty close to full and hasn't released quite yet. But here I go on to talk about it's a little bit more specific than I'll get into and explain, but then a future outlook, the basin, it's changing almost every day. The face of the glacier that the basin's facing is constantly calving and melting, so the volume and the shape of the basin's completely changing over time, which makes this a really complicated issue for people to understand. Yeah, and it was really cool to be able to fly my drone and use all the photos that I've taken and have them serve a good purpose instead of just being photos that sit on my computer. And I didn't have time to keep this story map relatively small. I didn't want to include anything about how it's monitored or the methods that the scientists use to study it. So I created another story map that I won't get into here that explains that whole process. Next slide, please. Okay, so the two story maps, they're hosted on the junoflood.com, which is flood dashboard. It's a website that has a bunch of relevant information about the Juneau flood. So it has flood inundation maps that were created earlier this year, information about flood forecasting and flood events. And so these story maps are going to live within that website to provide more educational resources. So that's where they can be found. And to get them out there, my plan is I have them ready, I haven't posted them. I have 2 social media posts and a short video to post as well. And then planning on printing stickers and then handing them out around town. And even without sharing them like on social media yet, the story maps have had decent traction from the flood dashboard. Last I checked this morning, I think it has like over 500 views already, which is really exciting. So yeah, that's my project. That's what I spent my summer on. Thanks a ton, Aaron, for all the help and everybody else who helped me get it to be what it is. And yeah, thanks a ton.
Great, thanks, Diego. And we're gonna save the presentations or the questions until the end. So we will just move on to the next speaker. You get to try to deal with this computer, Gigi. There we go.
Hi. So my name is Gigi, and this summer I worked with Katie Spellman, Sarah Clements, and Chris Mark on a summary report for their Fresh Eyes on Ice research. It's just a quick ellipsis, by the way. To the next slide. So just to provide a little bit of background, rising temperatures have been driving changes in the ice conditions in Alaska, and in particular changes in the ice thickness, particularly as trends of thinning ice emerge among northern Alaska, and changes in the timing of winter freeze up and also spring breakup impact both safety of travel and things like ecosystems, recreation, access to cultural and subsistence resources, and also the flooding patterns. So Fresh Eyes on Ice really includes numerous research projects and also engagement with community monitoring teams to build out a resource of both data sharing and capacity to help inform some of the decisions that people will make using ice in this new and changing environment. So the project right now is wrapping up after 6 years of incredible research across Alaska and includes collaboration from UAF, various students and teachers, federal partners, indigenous elders, and many more people. And the team really was aiming to improve the monitoring of ice by analyzing previously existing ice records using satellite remote sensing to see things like open water zones in the rivers or lakes, going out into the field and doing some surveys, and engaging in workshops with community monitoring teams, which can be seen in this graphic, the various partners around the state represented in the stars. And astonishingly, there were about 6,000 community photo observations submitted by these partners, and 1,000 of which came from Fairbanks. So to provide a little bit more background, it's very unique in the Fresh Eyes on Ice project that has its foundations in a needs assessment. So this really ensured that the science met the data needs and questions. So about the data needs and questions of Alaskan communities. And the goal was to share the science in a way that was useful and accessible to people who are using the ice. And this could include people like community members or other scientists or forecasters, anyone who wants to learn more about ice. So the needs assessment, to break it down a little bit more, there are a variety of surveys conducted to better understand what data was missing and also what Alaskans wanted to know about the ice. So this graphic also helps explain some of the information that came out of this survey, demonstrating the ways people wanted to use the ice data. And for the project and research, the communication project, the audience really defined the goals and objectives. The main categories of audiences that we identified were Alaskans who use ice in general, which could be for recreation or subsistence or for travel. The participants, which were mainly K-12 students, and the teachers, the funders of the project, and the scientists. So then for each audience, we had a specific goal in mind that the report would accomplish. So for ice users, it was to help them make better informed decisions about their safety on ice. For K-12, was to inspire and offer science. For funders, it was to inspire future funding or continued partnerships. And then for scientists, it was to encourage them to read further into the published papers or also to use the ice data. And then the process of the messaging and design had to be dynamic due to the wide range of users that the report was trying to reach. So we used messaging that was trying to be inclusive to all ages, and we did so through the actual design of the report. It was a magazine style glossy report, which I'll show some images of later on. And the tactics that we used were things like illustrations or simplifying / stylizing graphics, using cohesive storytelling, and then also organizing the content into thematic questions. And these were, why do we study ice? How do we study ice? And then where do we study ice? So the process itself took a lot of meetings and iterations and learning sessions. So we began with a concept map that basically provided a layout for what the report was going to look at. And then I learned how to use InDesign, and I learned the fundamentals of graphic design. And then in the box number 2, you can see that after many meetings, we decided we needed to reorganize it so that the content actually revisited the audience analysis, and we made sure that the audience was really driving the report. And in box 3, you can see that the final product looked a lot different than the original concept map, and it came from many different iterations and involved a lot of learning. So this was my first time using any Adobe Suite / InDesign or Illustrator or Fresco, so it was quite a learning curve. That involved a lot of LinkedIn workshop sessions, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to practice art and illustration as well, which is a great add in from this project. And I think the biggest challenge that I faced was trying to balance the different user groups, especially since they have such different needs for the data. And the product had to be basically interpretable and engaging to people like students, but also to scientists and also to funders. So that's where the design really came into play for this project. And then We basically, after reorganization, I started to call it the Glossy Reconceived. There's this new organized version of the report. And this really focused on the challenge of reaching all the audiences, using graphics and illustrations and storytelling. So it came out to be about 32 pages right now, and it's on like 16 or something, I'm not sure, but number 16 version. And it really emphasized the organization of a content in a way that would answer the questions of Alaskans and community members, but also was showing the results of the research in a cohesive and organized way. So here are 2 examples that I put in of spreads that use some illustrations or graphics to help demonstrate the different, or try to balance the different needs of audiences. And then here is another example of a spread that included illustration as a way to bridge the gap between the different audiences. For example, here younger viewers could look at the illustration to gather what was happening, the different types of scientific methods, but then someone more familiar with the concepts could read the blurbs and a little bit more about the research itself. And so the final steps of this project will include some revisions, thinking about metrics and media. So I will be continuing to work with the scientists to finish up the last couple versions, and then we'll think about how we want to measure success in promoting this project, or what sort of metrics we're going to use. And then lastly, we will have to disperse the material in some way. And then, I don't know how to go back, but anyways, disperse the material and then have some sort of promotional package for it. And then I can't go back to my last slide, but thank you to the scientists who helped me throughout and supported me with all the feedback, and Kristen for all the graphic design help, and the other interns for feedback, and also the communications team for all of the learning. So thank you.
Next up is Alexis Isherwood, talking about the Yukon River Salmon Project.
So hi everybody, my name is Alexis, and this summer I had the opportunity to work on several products focused on Yukon River salmon with Eric Shane. So just to give a little background, the Yukon River spans over 1,900 miles and is home to several species of salmon, especially the Chinook, also known as king, chum, and koho. These salmon are anadromous, meaning they migrate from the Bering Sea upstream through the Yukon, all the way across Alaska and into Canada. Unfortunately, salmon populations, particularly Chinook and chum, have been in decline. As a result, salmon fisheries have been closed in recent years, affecting communities across Alaska that depend on these fish for food, culture, and livelihood. So today I'll be sharing 3 of the products I created this summer, starting with my conceptual diagram. All right, so for my first product, Eric and I set out to create a conceptual diagram that highlights how wildfires are contributing to rising stream temperatures and how those changes may be impacting salmon species. So the diagram was originally designed to accompany Eric's upcoming scientific paper, but it also stands on its own as a tool for communicating these research findings more broadly. It's especially intended for scientists, professors, and students, most likely here at UAF, and anyone reading the upcoming scientific paper by Eric Shane in general. So to give a little background on the research behind the diagram, it was inspired by the graph shown on the right. So the study determined that after a wildfire, land surface temperatures remain 1 to 3 degrees warmer for over 15 years after a wildfire, as well as stream temperatures averaging 1.7 degrees Celsius warmer after the wildfires. So after learning about this research, I had to familiarize myself with Adobe Illustrator. I have used Illustrator before, but never in this capacity. So with the help of Kristen, I was able to start off by manipulating one of her old diagrams, as you can see on the left. This allowed me to learn how to create vectors and manage layers, as there were already like about 50 layers on that original diagram. And from there, I was able to create this first initial draft. After Eric and I talked, I decided that there needed to be a burned and unburned landscape, and we also wanted to include visual elements like satellite measuring land surface temperature and data loggers measuring the stream temperature. And so that's how the initial draft was born. After many revisions from feedback with Eric, Jeff Balke, and my fellow interns, I decided to add additional stream tributaries, squares highlighting surface temperature plots. As you can see on the burned side, it has the red squares, and then on the unburned, the blue squares. Elements to foreshadow wildfire, more realistic spruce trees and distant mountain scenery. Before they were all green, and then I realized Yukon doesn't really have green mountains, so we added the brown. And then juvenile salmon or par and graylings that are conveyed this study site. As for my second project, most people know that salmon populations, especially Chinook, are declining, but many people don't understand why. Well, many different factors do play a role. I created a series of infographics that highlight some of the key environmental changes happening in the Yukon River Basin and how these changes are impacting salmon populations. So it was definitely a challenge to narrow down the focus, but we ultimately chose 4 key topics: stream temperature, habitat quality, declining salmon body size, and species interactions. These infographics were created with Yukon River communities and organizations in mind, especially those who are interested in sharing accessible information about salmon in this region. So here are the infographics. Creating these infographics involved a lot of research and finding the right visuals, and each one explores a range of topics. So the stream temperature infographic highlights warming trends, temperature barriers, the effects on juvenile growth, and the potential implications for future salmon survival. The habitat quality infographic focuses on block coverts featuring fieldwork by graduate student Kristen Reese, and also addresses the long-term impacts of historic mining. The declining salmon body size infographic highlights statistically significant trends, especially in Chinook salmon, which are now producing smaller juveniles than in the past. This infographic is more data-driven than the others, especially thanks to Heather McFarland's salmon graphics. And finally, the species interactions infographic explores the roles of beavers, aquatic and terrestrial predators, prey species, and pathogens, highlighting Theophanes, which is a pathogen found in fish species. So in addition to these infographics, for this product, I created a social media or media kit. This was basically in mind to give organizations an accessible and engaging way to share the information without having to figure out a way to break down the infographics into a more digestible content themselves. This is an example of the media kit, a post idea based on the habitat quality infographic. And finally, for my third product, I had the incredible opportunity to travel to the Upper Yukon River in Eagle, Alaska this past July, where I witnessed part of the Yukon River Drainage Fisheries Association, or YRFA's Biofisheries Technician Workshop. I just wanted to take a moment to highlight this workshop because it provides Yukon River residents with the training and certifications they need to improve their chances of securing fisheries jobs with their own communities, and it was a really cool thing to witness. Creating a 2-page newsletter about the experience was both fun and rewarding. I truly enjoyed speaking with everyone at YRFA and learning more about fisheries along the Yukon River directly from the people who live there. I do believe that being there and hearing from the participants firsthand really helped shape my other projects as well. And I really enjoyed my time there. I was there for about like 5 days. All right, so for what's next, all of these products are still in various stages of the feedback stage. So I will be finalizing them hopefully soon. Then I will be hopefully distributing the infographics and social media kit to groups and individuals passionate about sharing information on the Yukon River salmon with Eric. And then I also hope to publish and share the YRFA news piece to help raise awareness for next year's workshop in St. Mary's on the YRFA website, and then maybe a CASC-oriented version as well on the AKCASC website. I just want to thank everybody who helped me this summer, especially Eric for working with me this summer, helping me create all of these amazing products, and Kristen for supporting me throughout the entire internship and helping me with Illustrator. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name's Taylor. I worked on the USGS Benchmark Glacier project. So this project is one of the longest running glacier monitoring programs in the country. So yeah, next slide, please. So a bit of background on this research. This research has over 70 years of consistent mass balance measurements. It's used in the World Glacier Monitoring Service that provides data on sea level rise, other glacial monitoring programs. So backing up a little bit, mass balance refers to how much mass was gained in the winter via snow precipitation, compared to how much mass was lost in the warmer months in the form of meltwater. So this data provides a background for modeling sea level rise, as I said, climate projections, and water resource management. Twice a year, researchers at this project travel to 5 different glaciers across the country through Alaska, Montana, and Washington to make seasonal mass balance measurements. You can see in this map where the glaciers are located and when they started their measurements, the year that they started. So you can see I live actually pretty close to Lemon Creek Glacier. It's been measured since 1953. And I actually have some friends that this summer are up there right now studying the glacier through the Juneau Icefield Research Program. So this program and this project really hits home, quite literally. Next slide, please. Yeah, so goals and audience. So with discussions from the Alaska Science Center scientists at the USGS, we came to the conclusion that increasing awareness of this program was crucial. So at this program, the data is more broadly known in academia and research. So I really wanted to shift the focus to Alaska residents and maybe if they were unaware of the project and those who are affected and impacted by changing glaciers, increased runoff, and the spiraling effects that come with this. So I developed 2 articles on this project where I really wanted to create a character-driven piece that employed storytelling as a tool to share data and information in a more compelling and relatable way. I also really wanted to highlight the people behind the research to develop more trust in science within the audience. Next slide. Awesome. So yeah, so the process was definitely a challenge. I did have most of the interviews did occur over Zoom, but I did have an amazing opportunity to travel to Anchorage this summer and meet with the team at the Alaska Benchmark Glacier project and conduct interviews in person. So we looked at and assembled some of the tools that they used to make the measurements, and we even looked at a peat sample from 1,000 years ago. It's kind of similar to its soil, has all this grass and dirt in it. It was very well preserved by the glacier, and it was found on one of their expeditions. So definitely to use these interviews effectively, you can see in the left, I developed transcripts for these interviews through a program online, and I chose facts and stories that I found really compelling. And sometimes you can see that some of these interviews were over an hour long. So definitely had to narrow down a lot of complex and interesting information to make it a bit more relatable and digestible. Next slide, please. Yeah, so some of these pictures are from my trip that I took to Anchorage. And there's that peat sample from the glacier. It still has some of the grass and roots intact. And then interviewing Chris McNeil, who is a glaciologist on the program, and you can see his dog, super cute. And then I did get an amazing opportunity to visit their weather station in Anchorage, their field station in Anchorage, and we were searching for parts from the weather station that they had to decommission to no avail, but it was really interesting to look be at that site and see a little bit more about the process behind this. And then there's some mass balance measurements in the right corner from Louis Sass in his field notebooks. So yeah, definitely a really good insight into some of the inner workings behind the project. Yeah, next slide, please. Sweet. So this is the final product. I came up with 2 articles, and where one of them really focuses on how scientists themselves are adapting to glacial change. So maybe some of their routes might have been altered by the shifting glacier. There was one route that they used for over 50 years that is now has turned into a lake. So it's very interesting to look at how people adapt to these changes. I also wrote an article on the right about how glaciers, how this project is really influential to a lot of other science, specifically ecosystem science and hydrology. So definitely looking at how this science can also propel future scientists too. So I also wanted to mention that I did write another article this summer about how berry timing and harvest are impacted by changing ice and snowpack. So that was another product that I came out with. Next slide, please. Sweet. So this is the kind of like overview of one of the articles. You can see that I did disperse some pictures throughout it to make it more digestible and kind of break up the information. So yeah, I sprinkled in some facts and information and quotes. So I'd love to share a little bit of the article in the next slide, if that's okay. So I'll just read an excerpt. For more than 70 years, scientists have woven together a tapestry of glacial data, threaded together by snowy expeditions, satellite imagery, and dozens of marked up yellow notebooks, all to better understand how glaciers respond to a changing climate. Glaciologists have spent decades recording how the glaciers are evolving, documenting these places before they disappear, fading into meltwater. So that's a little section, little taste. Next slide, please. And then here's another little taste, but this is one of the quotes that I used that I found really impactful from a past glaciologist on the program. She said that people really value these records emotionally. They really want to see them continue. People have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into keeping this going. So I found that really impactful personally and included that in some of my articles. And then also, I really wanted to give a huge shout out to Louis Sass, who provided a lot of these beautiful imageries or photography. He is an incredible photographer, so I'm really lucky to use some of this imagery. Next slide, please. And then I made a promotional video on the project. I used collage and art to make it more compelling, to tell the story or a little trailer of their research. So if you don't mind playing that.
For more than 70 years, the U.S. Geological Survey has measured how glaciers respond to climate change. This is the Benchmark Glacier project. Using direct measurements from the glacier, weather station data, and satellite imagery, they've created one of the longest records of glacier change in North America. Since the turn of the century, melting glaciers have contributed to 21% of global sea level rise. Making this research critical for tracking this rise, climate modeling, water resources, and communities worldwide.
Yeah, so definitely a little bit of tweaks need to be done with that video. And yeah, so that was one of the promotional materials that I made for this. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, sweet. So next steps are publishing. So I'm really excited to learn how to pitch to news organizations like Alaska Public Media. And I'm really wanting to focus on local news stations close to these glaciers, like KTOO, some organizations in Fairbanks, Juneau, Seward. And then potentially this work is very valuable and to the UN International Year of Glacier Preservation. 2025 is that year, and so maybe a great way to get this out here to the world would be through them. So yeah, next slide, please. Sweet, and that's it for my project. I really wanted to give a huge shout out and say how grateful I am to Kristen Tim, Erin Hood, and Leah Ferguson for their guidance, as well as all the fellow interns and all the people that provided their expertise and were involved in the interview process. Yeah, thank you guys so much for your time. Thanks.
Okay, and I'm going to turn it back over to Diego to share one final collaborative project before we open up for questions.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, I got just a few slides to talk about a collaborative intern project that everybody cooperated to do. So back in January, Christian Thorsberg, a former Alaska AKCASC science communicator, and I were tasked with creating a project to tell the story or to talk about the research that's been funded about changing snow and ice. And so what we came up with was we wanted to tell the human side of the story as well as the research side, similar to what Taylor did. And so we decided that this could look like a magazine. So next slide, please. So Christian, myself, Gigi, and Taylor, we all wrote a story or more stories for the magazine. I won't read the titles of all of them, but an example of a story. Well, Taylor, all of Taylor's stories are great examples of what you could find within this magazine that'll be coming out hopefully really soon. Next slide, please. Besides just photographs, we wanted to include some artwork. And so Taylor and Gigi, they worked really hard and created, here are a few of some watercolors that we're gonna intersperse within the magazine to give it a more personal touch. I think they did an awesome job on that. Next slide, please. Alexis, she prepared a social media plan. So once the stories are ready to launch, it'll be a lot easier to promote them based off of what she's already planned and thought about. And we're gonna have Molly Tankersley as well, who is a graphic designer to design the magazine, but Taylor helped out a lot and created a pitch deck about what it could look like and what kind of design we're going for. And so on the right is like a mock-up of what the table of contents could potentially look like, but the design of the project is still in the works. Yeah, so hopefully that'll be out soon. As thanks to all the interns and everybody who we interviewed. There's a lot of people who collaborated on this, so I didn't write any names, but thank you to everyone who collaborated. Yeah.
All right, well, yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in and listening about all the projects. I'm gonna actually stop the screen share here so that we could see both Diego and Taylor, and then I'll invite Gigi and Alexis to come up. And if anybody has any questions for one or all of the whole cohort of interns, we still have a little more than 5 minutes. Also, I'm gonna pass around a sheet. If you want updates on all or just some of these projects as they get wrapped up and finalized, please sign up. We'll of course advertise these through all the usual CASC methods, but if you want to make sure that you don't miss this information as soon as it's done, you can sign up, and there will also be a link in the chat for anybody online to sign up for updates as things get finalized. So yeah, anybody have any questions to kick us off?
I have a question.
Yeah.
My name is Moises, and I have a question for Kristen and then one for the interns. For you, I'd love to hear just the field of science communication. Where do you see this evolving and what type of role it plays in our society? And for the interns, I'd love to hear what type of impact do they hope to achieve with their projects?
Yeah, well, I'll just very briefly talk, because I don't want to be the focus of this, but I think one really interesting thing that I think about science communication is just moving from this model where we only rely on scientists to talk about their science to having like expertise in communication, and specifically in science communication. So I think a really interesting area that this field is moving is towards like more organizational and team-based approaches. And that's definitely something that gets modeled in the internship project as a whole. But yeah, I'll turn it over to the rest of you to answer that question.
I can start. I don't know where to look exactly, but that's okay.
Kristen,
I studied policy in college, and I always thought, well, something I learned from this internship is that it takes a lot more to reach a decision maker than one would think, and it takes a lot more of thoughtfulness about the product that you're creating. And I really appreciated from Kristen and the rest of the communications team learning that it all comes down to like the individual decision maker. So when we're thinking about policy, it also comes to like changing how people think about like their daily lives. So like if I'm someone who lives in a rural community and I need to like travel to the next community, I should be thinking about ice, and I'm making that decision about the ice, and then that goes into like maybe who I'm voting for, and et cetera, et cetera. So I thought that was one of my main takeaways from this internship, is that even like a small impact on just like your neighbor or someone like a colleague or a peer is really important. So I hope from my product that I'm making just to change one person's mind about ice.
I guess I'll go next. So before this internship, I mostly did research myself. I didn't do a lot in communications. And I really enjoyed doing the other side of the, I guess, and being able to communicate the research rather than doing the research myself. I found it really impactful to go out to Eagle recently and talk with people who lived on the Yukon River and really understand their understanding of fisheries and how they used to work with salmon since they can't anymore, and just really hear about their impact and like how that's changed their lives, how they really can't fish much for at least Chinook and chum salmon. And I just really enjoyed listening to their stories and being able to communicate that. I'm hoping that my products will be able to be shared with people once they're done with the feedback stages, but I really hope I can at least change a few people's minds and really show why knowing about Yukon River salmon fisheries is important, because it would be great if the populations could start not so much declining, but increasing, and then maybe the fisheries could eventually open up again. You never know. So that'd be great if my communication products could kind of help, shine some light on that.
And Taylor or Diego, do either of you want to chime in?
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, I feel like with science communication, I first was studying journalism and then I switched over to science. So I feel like that has led to a really good bridge and intermingling of the both of these fields. And I feel like science communication is like very valuable to me personally. Like I have learned so much through documentaries, articles, and I think that for me personally, art is a really good way of engaging people and inspiring people to make changes within their own lives and their own communities. So I feel like science communication can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but overall, it's just a way of getting like the really impactful science out there to the world. So yeah.
I'll chime in. Hola familia. I'll say I didn't expect to be working on a project that was about like natural disasters. And so yeah, I was kind of going in blind. I just finished an environmental science degree and we looked at a lot of different things, but I didn't know about the outburst floods until I moved to Juneau last year. And so it was shocking to me, to be living in a place that is actively experiencing glacier recession and a huge flood every year from it. And so it was really, I felt impactful to be able to work on a team that is working to help the public understand these kind of things and provide the tools for people to make decisions that are really important to their livelihood. And yeah, the psychology of how people deal with disasters is really interesting. I went to a barbecue. The news station had a barbecue, and I talked to a lot of the neighbors and people that are impacted by the flood. And they had a lot of stories and things to say about how the flood dashboard and the work that has been done by the university has really helped them understand the floods, how they work, and just prepare for them now that it's becoming a greater and greater issue. So being able to be a small part of that process is really rewarding.
Thank you.
It looks like Katie has a question here in the chat. Was there any part of the strategic communication design process that surprised you or that you hadn't considered before this internship?
I can go. Time was a really big consideration that I really never had thought about within how much time and effort it could take to just produce an article or any communication product. I think it takes way more time than I thought and people would think in general. So just like yeah, just I think the value of these projects and everyone's work is just like a labor of love in a way. Yeah.
I would also add like the thoughtfulness that goes behind every decision that someone makes in the communication project was something I definitely didn't consider. And now very much appreciate.
I would add for my conceptual diagram, I didn't expect there to be so many revisions of going back and forth, especially on like such little things as like a color, and or like adding an animal into the diagram. So that was definitely surprising.
I would add, yeah, you guys covered it mostly, but how, yeah, the intentionality behind everything is super specific. So it's really easy to just see like a magazine or like an article or like a museum exhibit or whatever it is and think like, oh, it's like whatever. But like there's so much thought and time and like, yeah, value put on every, like almost like every word that is used in this context. And that surprised me how intentional it really is.
Great, well, we're all out of time, but we'll take one more question.
I was gonna ask if you guys would have any advice for the next round of interns.
I would say, I feel like going back, I would change my process on this, but not to jump right into the project, even though it's really exciting. It takes a couple days to think about it more.
Yeah, just really being set on your like organization skills and planning. I think that's one of the biggest parts of this internship. Is just planning well, and I think I'm still learning about that. So it's a continuous process. Yeah.
I would say always be open to feedback. Feedback is a large part of creating these products. So yeah, always being open to feedback, input from anyone, honestly, whether it be the scientists you're working with or other things.
I think I have a lot of advice I could offer an intern, but I think tracking the process would be worthwhile. Yeah, like from the beginning of the internship to now, so much has been done, but at times it feels like nothing has been done. And keeping a closer track of the things and the process that you've embarked upon, it will be valuable looking back at how much you've grown and how much work you actually got done.
Great, well, we're out of time, so big round of applause again for the thanks everybody for joining today. We still have this room for a little while, so if anybody wants to chat to anybody or chat with anybody, I'll keep Diego and Taylor up on the screen too for a little while. If anyone has any